Chapter 15. The Andromeda Nebula. The huge plain of El Homra stretches away to the south of the Gulf of Sirte in North Africa. Up to the time the trade winds and doldrums were eliminated, it had been known as Hamada, the Red Desert, a waste of sand and stone, especially the triangular red stones that had given it its name. In summer, it had been an ocean of scorching sunlight, and during the autumn and winter nights, it became an ocean of cold winds. Only the wind now remained of the old Hamada, and that sent wave after wave across the tall silvery blue grass that covered the firm soil of the plain. The grass had been transplanted from the South African veldt. The whistling of the wind and the bowed grass awakened in man's memory an uncertain feeling of sorrow and, at the same time, a feeling that the great grassy plains are somehow close to his heart, something that he had met with before in his life, not just once before, but many times and under different circumstances, in sorrow and in joy, in good times and bad. Every takeoff or landing of a spaceship left behind a circle, about a kilometer in diameter, of scorched and poisoned earth. These circles were surrounded by red metal screens and were out of bounds for a period of 10 years, twice as long as the harmful fallout from the spaceship's exhaust would be active. After each landing or takeoff, the cosmoport was transferred to another place which gave its buildings the imprint of temporariness and made its staff kin to the ancient nomads of the Sahara, who for thousands of years traversed the desert on a special kind of animal, with a humped back, a long curved neck and big corns on its paws, an animal called the camel. The planet ship Barion, on its 13th journey between the satellite under construction and Earth, brought Darveter to the Arizona plain that, on account of the accumulated radioactivity there, still remained a desert even after the climate had changed. At the very dawn of the application of nuclear energy in the era of disunity, many experiments and tests of this new technique had been carried out there. The radioactive fallout has remained to this day. It is now too weak to harm man but is sufficient to check the growth of trees and bushes. Darveter took pleasure not only in the great charm of Earth, its blue sky and a bridal gown of white clouds, but also in the dusty soil, the scanty, tough grass. How wonderful it was to walk with a firm tread on solid earth, under the golden rays of the sun and with his face turned to meet the fresh, dry breeze. After he had been on the threshold of cosmic space, he could better appreciate the full beauty of our planet that our ancestors had once called the Vale of Tears and Sorrow. Grom Orm did not detain the builder, for he himself wanted to be present when Leben took off. They arrived at El Homra together on the day the expedition was to leave. While still airborne, Darveter noticed huge patches on the dull, steel-gray plain. The one on the right was almost circular and the other was more elongated, an oval with the narrow end turned away from the other. These patches had been made by the spaceships of the 38th Cosmic Expedition that had recently left. The circle came from the spaceship Tintagel that had gone to the terrible star T and was loaded with all sorts of apparatus for the siege of the disk ship from distant worlds. The oval was made by Ayala, whose ascent was less steep. This ship was taking a large group of scientists to investigate the changes in matter that took place on the white dwarf of the triple star Omicron II Eridani. The ash that remained where the ship's exhausts had burnt up the stony ground was about 5 feet thick and was covered with a binding material to prevent its being wind-carried. All that remained was to move the red fences from the old takeoff ground, and this would be done as soon as Lebed left. And there stood Lebed, iron-gray in her heat armor that would burn off during her passage through the atmosphere. After that, the ship would continue its flight with gleaming walls capable of reflecting any known radiations. Nobody, however, would see it in this magnificence except the robot astronomers that tracked the flight. These machines would provide the people with nothing more than photographs of a flashing dot in the sky. When a ship came back to Earth, it was always covered with dross and scored with furrows and hollows made by the explosions of tiny meteoric bodies. Darveter remembered how Tantra had returned grayish-green and rust-red, with parts of her outer walling in a state of collapse. None of the people standing around Lebed would ever see her again, since none of them could live the 172 years that must elapse before she returned, 168 independent years of travel and 4 years to explore the planets. Darveter's work was such that he would probably not live long enough even for the ship to arrive at the planet of the Green Star. Just as in those days of doubt, Darviter once again felt great admiration for the bold ideas of Ren Bose and M. Mass. What did it matter that their experiment had failed? What did it matter that the problem, one which affected the very foundations of the cosmos, was still far from solution? What did it matter if it was all nothing more than a figment of the imagination? These lunatics were giants of creative thought, for even in the refutation of their theories and the failure of their experiments, people would make tremendous progress in many fields of knowledge. Lost in thought, Darviter almost stumbled over the signal indicating the safety zone, turned round and saw a well-known figure. Running his fingers through his unruly red hair and screwing up his sharp eyes, Ren Bose came running towards him. A network of thin, scarcely perceptible scars had changed the face of the physicist by wrinkling it into an expression of pained intensity. "I'm glad to see you well again, Ren. I want you urgently," said Ren Bose, holding his tiny freckled hands out to Viter. "What are you doing here, so long before the takeoff? I saw Ayawaoff. I'm very interested in the gravitation of such a heavy star. I heard you would come, and so I waited for you." Darviter waited for an explanation. "I hear you are returning to the observatory of the outer stations, as Junius Antis has requested." Darviter nodded. "Antis has recently recorded several undeciphered messages received from a great circle transmission. Every month, messages are received outside the usual transmission hours, and each month, the transmission time is advanced by 2 terrestrial hours. In the course of a year's testing, this amounts to an earthly day, and in 8 years it makes a whole 100,000th of a galactic second. That is how the gaps in the reception of the cosmos are filled in. During the last 6 months of the 8-year cycle, we have been receiving incomprehensible messages that undoubtedly come from a great distance. I'm very interested in them and would like you to take me as your assistant. It would be better for me to help you. We'll examine the records of the memory machines together. What about M. Mass? We'll take him, of course. Viter, that's just wonderful. I feel very awkward. Since that ill-fated experiment of mine, I have a feeling of guilt as far as the council is concerned. But I can get along easily with you, even if you are a member of the council and a former director and the one who advised me against the experiment. Mavin Mass is also a member of the council." The physicist thought for a while, smiled at some memory of his own. "Mavin Mass, he has a feeling for my ideas and tries to concretize them for me. Wasn't it in the concretization that you made a mistake?" Ren Bose frowned and changed the subject. "Is Veda Kong coming here?" "Yes, I'm waiting for her." "Did you know that she almost lost her life during the investigation of a cave, some ancient technical storehouse where there was a closed steel door?" "It's the first I've heard of it." "I forgot that unlike M. Mass, you have no great interest in history. The whole planet is discussing the affair and wondering what might be behind the door. Millions of people have volunteered to dig it out. Veda has given the problem to the Academy of Stochastics and Prognostication. Is Eve de Nachel coming here? No, she can't come. A lot of people will be disappointed. Veda is very fond of Evda, and Chara is simply devoted to her. Do you remember Chara? That's the panther-like girl. Either gypsy or Indian in origin." Darviter spread his hands in mock horror. "How well you appreciate feminine beauty. However, I'm always making the mistake that people made in the past when they did not know anything about the laws of psychophysiology and heredity. I always want to see my feelings and my perceptions in other people. Evda, like everybody else on the planet," said Ren Bose, ignoring Viter's confessions, "will be watching the takeoff." The physicist pointed to a row of high tripods carrying chambers for white, infrared, and ultraviolet reception, placed in a semicircle around the spaceship. The different groups of spectral rays introduced into the colored reproduction made the screen breathe with real warmth and life in the same way as the overtone diaphragms destroyed the metallic resonance in the transmission of the human voice. Darviter looked towards the north, whence came the heavily laden automatic electrobuses swaying across the earth. Veda Kong jumped out of the first bus to arrive and ran towards them, catching her feet in the grass. At a run, she threw herself on Darviter's broad chest with such force that the long plates that hung down from either side of her head were thrown over his shoulders and hung down his back. Darviter held Veda off at some distance and looked into that infinitely dear face to which her unusual hairdo imparted new qualities. "I was playing the Northern Queen of the Dark Ages for a children's film," she said, panting slightly. "I hardly had time to change and could not stop to do my hair. Darth could imagine her in a long, tight brocade dress and a golden crown with blue stones, her ash-blonde plaits reaching down below her knees, with fearless gray eyes. And he smiled with pleasure. "Did you wear a crown?" "Oh yes, and such a crown!" Veda's finger drew in the air the outline of a wide circle with teeth rounded in the shape of clover leaves. "Shall I see it?" "This very day. I'll ask them to show you the film." Darth was going to ask who the they were, but Veda was already greeting the serious-looking physicist who was smiling naively but wholeheartedly. "Where are the heroes of Achenar?" asked Renbos, looking at the spaceship that stood in splendid isolation. "Over there." Veda pointed to a tent-shaped building of milk-colored glass and outside girders of latticework, the main hall of the cosmoport. "Let's go there then." "We're not wanted there," said Veda firmly. "They are watching Earth's farewell to them." "Let's go to Lebed." The men followed her advice. As she walked beside Darth Vader, she asked softly, "Do I look too absurd in this old-fashioned hairdo? I could—" "You don't need to do anything. It makes a charming contrast to your modern dress, plaits longer than your skirt. Let it stay." "I obey you, my Vetter." Veda whispered the magic words that made his heart beat faster and brought color to his pale cheeks. Hundreds of people were making their way unhurriedly to the ship. Many of them smiled to Veda or greeted her with a raised hand much more frequently than they did Darth or Renbos. "You're very popular, Veda," said Renbos. "Is that due to your work as a historian or to your notorious beauty?" "Neither one nor the other. I mix with a lot of people, both in my work and in my social engagements. You and Vetter, you either hide in the depths of a laboratory or go away alone for some terribly straining night work. You do more for mankind and much more important things than I do, but it is all one-sided and not for the side that is nearer the heart. Charanandi and Evdanal are much more widely known than I am." "Again a reproach to our technical civilization?" asked Darth jokingly. "Not to ours, but to the leftovers of former fatal mistakes. 20,000 years ago, our troglodyte ancestors knew that art and the development of sensations connected with it were no less important to society than science." "In respect of relations between people?" asked the physicist with interest. "Exactly. There was an ancient sage who said that the most difficult thing on Earth is to preserve joy," Darth Vader put in. "Look, here comes another of Veda's loyal allies." Emvin Mass, with a light, swinging tread, was coming straight towards them, his huge black figure attracting considerable attention. "Chara's dance is over," Veda guessed. "Soon we'll see the crew of Lebed." "If I were them, I'd come over here on foot and as slowly as possible," said Darth Vader suddenly. "You're getting excited," said Veda, taking him by the arm. "Naturally. For me, it's painful to think that they're going away forever, and that I'll never see that ship again. There's something inside me that protests against that inescapable doom, perhaps because there are people in the ship that are dear to me." "That's probably not the reason," said Emvin Mass as he joined them. His sharp ears had caught Darth Vader's words. "It's the inevitable protest of man against implacable time." "Autumn sorrow?" asked Renbos, with just a shade of irony as he smiled at his friend with his eyes. "Have you noticed that it is the most energetic, vivacious people with the strongest feelings who mostly like the sad autumn of the temperate zones?" objected Emvin Mass, patting the physicist on the shoulder in a friendly way. "That's true enough," exclaimed Veda. "A very ancient observation. Darvater, are you there on the field? Darvater, are you there on the field? You are wanted on the televisophone of the central building by Junius Antis. Junius Antis is calling you on the TVP of the central building." Renbos started and straightened up. "May I go with you, Vader? Go along in my place. It doesn't matter much to you if you miss the takeoff." Junius Antis likes showing things in the old way, the direct reception and not the recording. In that respect, he is in complete agreement with Emvin Mass. The Cosmoport possessed a powerful TVP receiver and a hemispherical screen. Renbos entered the quiet round room. The operator on duty pressed a button and pointed to a side screen where the excited Junius Antis appeared immediately. He looked closely at the physicist and, realizing why Darth Vader had not come, nodded to Bose. I also intended watching the takeoff, but at the moment, there is an explorer reception going on in the former direction in the 6277th range. Take the directed ray funnel and focus it on the observatory. I'll send a vector ray across the Mediterranean to El Homra. Pick it up on the tubular fan and switch on the hemispherical screen. Junius Antis looked away for a moment and then added, "Hurry up!" The scientist, experienced in cosmic reception, did all that had been ordered within 2 minutes. In the depths of the hemispherical screen, a gigantic galaxy appeared, which both scientists recognized as the Andromeda Nebula, or M31, long known to mankind. In the outer turn of its spiral, the one nearest the onlookers, and almost in the very center of the lentil-shaped disk of the enormous galaxy, a tiny light appeared. There a whole system of stars branched off, looking like a thin hair, although it was probably a huge sleeve of the galaxy, 100 parsecs in length. The light began to grow, and the hair became bigger, while the galaxy disappeared beyond the field of vision. A stream of red and yellow stars stretched across the screen. The light changed into a little circle that gleamed at the end of the star stream. On the edge of the stream there was a prominent orange star, spectral class K, and around it the barely perceptible dots of planets were revolving. A disk of light was placed over one of them, completely covering it. Suddenly, it all began to whirl round in red curves with sparks flying out of them. Renbos closed his eyes. "That's a rupture," said Junius Antis from the side screen. "I've shown you a memory machine recording of what we observed last month. Now I'm going to switch on to a direct reception." Sparks and dark red lines were still whirling round on the screen. "What a peculiar phenomenon," exclaimed the physicist. "How do you explain that? Rupture, as you call it." "I'll tell you later. The transmission is beginning again. But what is it you think strange?" "The red spectrum of the rupture. In the Andromeda spectrum there is a violet bias. In other words, it should be drawing closer to us. The rupture has nothing to do with Andromeda. It is a local phenomenon. Do you think it accidental that their transmitting station is placed on the very edge of the galaxy, in a zone that is even farther removed from the center than the zone of the Sun in our galaxy?" Junius Antis cast a skeptical glance at Renbos. "You're prepared to start a discussion at any moment, forgetting that you're talking with the Andromeda Nebula at a distance of 45 parsecs. Yes, muttered the embarrassed Renbos. "That is at a distance of 1.5 million light-years. This communication was transmitted 15,000 centuries ago. What we're looking at now was sent out long before the Ice Age and the appearance of man on Earth." Junius Antis had become more amicable. The red lines slowed down their movements, the screen went dark, and then lit up again. A dully lit plane could scarcely be discerned in the twilight, with mushroom-shaped structures dotted here and there. Near the front, a gigantic, judging by the extent of the plane, blue circle with an obviously metallic surface gleamed coldly. One above the other, 2 huge disks, convex on both sides, hung directly over the center of the blue circle. No, they were not hanging, but were slowly rising higher and higher. The plane vanished, and only one of the disks remained on the screen. It was more convex below than above, and there were crudely spiral ribs on both sides. "Is it they? Is it they?" exclaimed both scientists almost together, thinking of the perfect similarity of this image with the photographs and drawings of the spiral disk the 37th Cosmic Expedition had found on the planet of the Iron Star. Another whirl of red lines, and the screen went dead. Renbos waited, afraid to take his eyes off the screen for even a second. The first human eye to see something of the life and thoughts of another galaxy. The screen, however, did not show any further signs of life. Junius Antis spoke from the side screen of the TVP. "The transmission has broken off. We cannot wait any longer because we are using too much of Earth's power resources. The whole planet will be astounded. We must ask the Economic Council for reception hours outside the regular program, at intervals more frequent than at present, but that will only be possible in a year's time, after so much has been spent on the dispatch of Lebed. Now we know that the spaceship on the Black Planet is from there. If Ergnor had not found it, we should never have understood what we have seen." "And that disk came from there? How long did it fly?" asked Renbos, as though talking to himself. "It has been flying dead for about 2 million years through the space that divides our 2 galaxies," answered Junius Antis sternly from the screen. It flew until it found refuge on the planet of Star T. Those spaceships are apparently built to land automatically, despite the fact that for thousands and thousands of years, no living hand has touched their mechanism. Perhaps they live a long time, but not millions of years. That would contradict the laws of thermodynamics, answered Junius Antis coldly. Even though it is of enormous size, the spiral disk could not contain a whole planet of people or intelligences. As yet, our two galaxies cannot reach each other, cannot exchange messages. They will, declared Renbos confidently, said goodbye to Junius Antis, and returned to the cosmoport whence the spaceship Lebed had just flown off. Darvader, Vedakong, Chara, and Miv and Mass stood somewhat apart from the two long rows of people who had come to see the ship off. All heads were turned in the direction of the central building. Noiselessly, a wide platform swept past them, accompanied by waving hands and shouts of greeting, something that people only permitted themselves in public on very special occasions. The 22 members of Lebed's crew were on the platform. The vehicle drew up against Lebed. At the tall, retractable lift stood a number of people in white overalls, the 20 members of the ground crew, mostly engineers working at the cosmoport. All of them had tired, drawn faces. During the past 24 hours, they had checked all the expedition's equipment once more and had tested the reliability of the ship with the tensor apparatus. In accordance with a custom that had been introduced with the first cosmic expeditions, the chairman of the commission reported to Erg Nur, who had again been appointed commander of the spaceship and of the expedition to Achernar. Other members of the commission placed their insignia on a bronze plate bearing their portraits, which was handed to Erg Nur. After this, they moved away to one side, and those who had come to bid farewell to the crew surged round the ship. The people drew up in front of the travelers, permitting their relatives to reach the small platform of the lift that was still vacant. Cinema cameramen recorded every gesture of the parting crew, a last memory of them to be left on Earth. Erg Nur noticed Vedakong when she was still some distance away. He thrust the bronze certificate into his wide astronaut's belt and hurried to the young woman. "It's good of you to have come, Veda. How could I not come? For me, you are a symbol of Earth and my past youth. Nisa's youth is with you forever. I won't say I'm not sorry about anything because it wouldn't be true. I'm sorry, first of all, for Nisa, my companions, and myself. The loss is too great. On this last time on the planet, I've learned to love Earth in a new way, more strongly, simply, and unconditionally. But you're going, nevertheless." "Erg? I must. If I were to refuse, I should lose Earth as well as the cosmos. The greater the love, the greater the deed. You've always understood me perfectly, Veda. Here's Nisa." I've just been admitting nostalgia to Veda. The girl with the shock of red curls lowered her eyelashes. She had grown thinner and looked like a boy. "I never thought it would be so hard. You're all of you so good, so pure, so beautiful to leave you, to tear one's body away from Mother Earth." The astro-navigator's voice trembled. Veda instinctively drew the girl towards her, whispering the mysterious words of feminine comfort. "In 9 minutes the hatches will be closed," said Erg in a soundless voice, his eyes fixed on Veda. "It's a long time yet," exclaimed Nisa simply and with tears in her voice. Veda, Erg, Vater, and Emvin Mass, like others present, were surprised and grieved that they could find no words to say. There was nothing with which to express their feelings in face of a magnificent deed that was to be performed for the sake of those who did not yet exist, and who would come many years later. Those who were leaving and those who were staying behind knew everything. What more could be said? What wishes, jokes, or promises could affect the hearts of people who were leaving Earth forever to plunge into the void of the cosmos? Man's second system of signals proved to be imperfect and gave way to the third. Profound glances, expressing passionate feelings that could not be transmitted verbally, were met in tense silence, or were engaged in making the most of Elhomra's wretched landscape. "Time!" came Ergnor's metallic voice like the snap of a herdsman's whip. The people hurried to board their ship. Veda, sobbing quite openly, pressed Nisa tightly. For a few seconds the two women stood cheek to cheek, their eyes tightly closed while the men exchanged parting glances and handshakes. The lift had already taken 8 of the astronauts into the black oval of the hatch. Erg Nur took Nisa by the hand and whispered something to her. The girl blushed, broke away, and ran to the spaceship. She turned round before stepping into the lift and met the big eyes of an unusually pale Chara. "May I give you a kiss, Chara?" she asked in a loud voice. Chara did not answer but jumped onto the lift platform, trembling all over, put her arms around the girl astronaut, then, without a single word, jumped down again and ran away. Erg, Noor, and Nisa went up together. The crowd stood motionless as the lift stopped for a moment opposite the black hatch in the brightly illuminated hull of Lebed, and two figures, a tall man and a graceful girl, stood side by side receiving Earth's last greetings. Vedekong clenched her fists and Darvader could hear her joints cracking. Erg, Noor, and Nisa disappeared. An oval door of the same gray color as the hull moved out of the black opening. A second later, the most discerning eye could not have detected the place where there had been an opening in the steep flanks of the huge hull. There was something human about the spaceship standing vertically on its landing struts. The impression was, perhaps, created by the round globe of the nose, surmounted by a pointed cap and gleaming with signal lights that looked like eyes. Or perhaps it was the ribbed bulkheads of the central storage part of the ship that had the appearance of the pauldrons of a knight's armor. The spaceship stood on its struts as though it were a giant standing on straddled legs, contemptuously and arrogantly peering over the heads of the crowd. The first takeoff signals sounded ominously. As though by magic, wide, self-propelled platforms appeared beside the ship to take away the people. The tripods of the TVP and the floodlights crawled away from the ship too, but they kept their lenses and their rays fixed on it. The gray hull of Lebed seemed to fade away and diminish in size. Evil-looking red lights glowed in the ship's head, the signal that the crew were ready to start. The vibration of its powerful motors made the Earth tremble as the spaceship began to turn on its landing struts to get direction for the takeoff. The platforms with the people seeing the ship off moved farther and farther away until they were to the leeward of the safety line that gleamed phosphorescent in the darkness. Here the people jumped down from the platforms and the latter went back for the others. "They'll never see us again, or our sky either, will they?" asked Chara, turning to Mven Mas, who bent low over her. "No, unless it's in a stereo telescope." Green lights flashed up under the ship's keel. The radio beacon turned furiously on the tower of the central building, sending out warnings of the giant ship's takeoff in all directions. "The spaceship is being ordered away!" A metal voice of tremendous power shouted so suddenly that Chara shuddered and clung tight to Mven Mas. "Everybody inside the danger circle, raise your hands above your heads. Raise your hands above your heads or you will be killed. Raise your hands above your heads or—" The automaton continued shouting while searchlights raked the field to make sure that nobody was left inside the danger line. There was nobody there and the searchlights went out. The robot screamed again and, it seemed to Chara, more furiously than before. "After the bell rings, turn your backs to the ship and shut your eyes. Keep them shut until the second bell rings." "Turn your backs to the ship and shut your eyes," howled the automaton with alarm and menace. "It's frightening," whispered Vedekong to her companion. Darvader calmly took from his belt half-masks with dark glasses rolled up into a tube, put one mask on Veda and the other on his own head. He just had time to fasten the buckles when a huge, high-pitched bell rang out, swaying back and forth under the roof of the signal tower. The ringing stopped and the grasshoppers, indifferent to everything, could be plainly heard. Suddenly, the spaceship gave a howl that penetrated right to the marrow of a man's bones, and its lights went out. Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, the howl swept across that dark plain, and the more impressionable people standing there felt that the ship itself was crying with sorrow at the departure. The howl broke off as suddenly as it had started. A wall of indescribably bright light shot up round the ship. Everything else in the world ceased to exist for a moment, except that cosmic fire. The tower of fire changed to a column, stretched out longer and thinner until it became a dazzlingly bright line of fire. The bell rang for the second time, and as the people turned round, they saw an empty plain on which was a huge patch of red-hot soil. There was a big star high up in the sky. The spaceship Lebed was moving away from Earth. The people wandered slowly back to the electrobuses, looking at the sky and then at the place where the ship had taken off, a place that had suddenly become as lifeless as if the Hamada el-Homra had returned, the desert that had been the terror of travelers in days gone by. Well-known stars gleamed on the southern horizon. All eyes were turned to the point where the bright blue star Achernar burned in the sky. Lebed would reach that star after a journey of 84 years at a speed of 800 million kilometers an hour. For us, on Earth, it would be 84 years, but for Lebed it would be 47. Perhaps they would find a new world, just as beautiful and joyous, in the green rays of the zirconium sun. Darvetter and Veda Kong overtook Charanandi and Mvin Mas. The African was answering the girl's questions. No, it is not sorrow, but a great and sad pride. Such are my feelings today. Pride because we rise ever higher above our planet and merge with the cosmos. Sorrow because our beloved Earth is becoming so small. Long, long ago, the Mayas, the red-skinned people of Central America, left behind them a proud and sad inscription. I gave it to Erg-Nur, and he'll have it written up in the library laboratory of Lebed. The African looked round and noticed that friends who had caught up with them were listening too. He continued in a louder voice, Thou, who will later show thy face here, if thy mind can think thou wilt ask, who were they? Ask the dawn, ask the forest, ask the waves, ask the storm, ask love. Ask the earth of suffering and the earth beloved. Who are we? We are the earth. I too am earth through and through, added Mevin Mas. Renbos came running up to meet them, panting for breath. The friends surrounded the physicist, who told them in a few words the unprecedented news, the first contact between two gigantic stellar islands. I hope to get here before the takeoff, said Renbos sadly, to tell Erg-Nur about it. While he was still on the Black Planet, he realized that the spiral disk had come from a far distant world, a completely alien world, and that the strange ship had been flying for a long time in the cosmos. Will Erg-Nur never know that the spiral disk has come from such tremendous depths of the universe, that it has come from another galaxy, from the Andromeda Nebula? Asked Veda. What a pity that he did not hear today's reception. He'll hear about it, said Derviter, with confidence. We'll ask the Council to sanction power for a special transmission. I'll call the spaceship through Satellite 36. Lebed will be within range of our transmitters for another 19 hours.